Assalamu alaikum. This is the sixth session, and we are now starting to wrap up. Higher? Okay. This is this 7 or 6?
No, this is
six. This is the sixth session, and now we are starting to wrap up. And the beginning part of the presentation is going to be a repetition of what you have already heard in the previous 5 sessions. So a good deal of time is going to be a repetition. But because what we were trying to do since the beginning was, Faraz motivated us with what we shall study this topic. Then Yunus Emre came up with what sort of a methodology we are going to follow. Then in the following 3 sessions, there were those 3 ideas, 3 alternatives, which was supposedly explaining the phenomena that we observe. And now, in this session, I'm supposed to show that since in the previous 3 sessions, those alternative ideas were defeated, now what would be our suggestion? So what else is left out there in order to explain the existence? So let's start with what Faraz was saying. And of course, it's just going to be 5 minutes. I mean, it was very beautiful the way that Faraz put it. So his title was Doubt, a Heart's Cry for Satisfaction and Truth. And he started with saying that we have questions, like a lot of existential questions. Why do I exist? Why does this world exist? What is life? Why do I suffer loss and pain? Or in general, why do I suffer? Why is there suffering? And the pictures over there, we all enjoy spring. Then the beautiful green of summer comes. But then the fall and the winter comes, and this is the thing that we always go through in all our relations, not only in terms of the seasons, but in terms of our human relations, if you like. We start with nice, good days, then it comes to maturity, then things start declining. With our health, the same thing goes on and on. So this sort of cycle, death is always there. And this is a problem which never goes anywhere. So, and then the heart looks for some satisfaction. What is the purpose then? Why am I here? Why is all this system out there, laid out there, and at the end I am dying? So, I mean, it's a big trouble. And the ultimate answers, supposedly coming from religion, turned out to be unsatisfactory, as Faraz was talking about in his own journey. So they are becoming like claims, but I need some evidence, some supporting idea. Why shall I believe in those ideas? Because as Faraz was putting it, they say, okay, there's going to be hereafter, and you are going, just bear with this problem here, but you're going to be recompensated after death. But, I mean, I want evidence still. My heart wants to be in peace when I am in here. I don't want to postpone it to after the grave. So this was the heart's cry. We are in need of evidence. And we came up with this verse. The creator of the universe is saying that, is there any doubt about God, creator of heavens and the earth? And we started from this verse, and Faraz attracted our attention in this verse to the creator of the heavens and the earth. So the creator himself, the God, defining himself, us, as the creator of the heavens and the earth. And the way that we started our journey for this retreat was, maybe we are missing the point about createdness. And so, since the very beginning, we kept asking the question, is the world really created? Or if I'm missing this point, if I'm not taking the world as a created entity, then how else do I take it? And here we have a beautiful baby. So we started saying that there are 3 possible explanations out there. I mean, they say causes make this, causes like parents or water, some external causes. This is what we mean by causes make this. Or milk, so you keep feeding the baby, and as the nutrients come in and the baby is becoming this beautiful. Or baby happens by itself, and while we were discussing this one, itself meaning that taking from a particle to molecules, DNA, I mean the subparts or internal things or brain, the organs of the baby, is making the baby. So in here, causes make this was a statement for external things are making. When it comes to happens by itself, we are more focusing on internal things making it. And there was this other approach, which was the previous session. It says nature makes it. And this one was more like a confused mind, and as was put in the previous session, as a like alternative or a reaction to God makes it, we are now saying that, okay, there is this imaginary, abstract machinery concept which is acting out there. The way that I feel like for nature is, it is a cloud-like entity. I cannot really define what it is, but I would like to call it within the existence itself. There is such an entity, and it is making the things. And in the previous sessions, we questioned what really we mean by this nature, and if it makes sense to attribute the beings to this one. So in this picture, causes make is an external cause. Happens by itself is an internal entity that we are attributing the beings to. And when it becomes nature, it's like still we are talking about things from the existence, within existence, yet some abstract concept. We are imagining some human constructed idea which we are trying to attribute this baby. And since we are going through the 23rd flash of Nursi, he was starting with pointing to these three options, and he said that, well, pretty much this is what is available out there. And if I can refute those three, then what is left behind would be, okay, then God makes it. So in the previous sessions, these three were shown to be either impossible or illogical or contradictory. So,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why are these three comprehensive? Why is there no other option?
So, I mean, the way that I understand is, causes make it is, we are talking about, again, we think in terms of materialism, mostly. Causes make it is, we are talking about external causes. And when we come in internal, we handle it with happens by itself. And we said that, okay, let's not go this much hardcore materialism, but let's imagine some sort of like laws, gravity law. Nobody says that this is gravity showing a matter, but still we believe in such a non-material cause, but we imagine it to be within the existence itself, and it's being handled by nature makes it. And of course, nobody explicitly says that it causes make it happens by itself, because the other day I was just quoting from a textbook. Within a single paragraph of the textbook, you can observe all three of them mixed together. But in this retreat, what we were trying to do is, well, none of them is making any sense anyways. Combining them doesn't make any sense further. So this was the main approach. But of course, I mean, if somebody tomorrow comes up with a better idea, we would like to consider and see if it makes sense or not.
Maybe just one point. The way I see these three options, they also correspond to three ways of, or let's say three dimensions of the reality that we interact with. I mean, there are one aspect of things that look themselves or the others. Right? So there's one aspect of the things which looks at themselves, like itself. There's another aspect of things that look at the other things, the causes. And there is another aspect of the things that looks something behind them, beyond them. Now, I think these aspects, they are always there, regardless of your attitude, regardless of you are believer or unbeliever. Like the reality has these different aspects, and we try to call them with names. So we say it happens itself, it's causes, makes it, all these different aspects. And I guess these three aspects like entirely exhaust our way of interaction with the reality.
They exhaust all the possible ways by which you can explain existence within existence itself.
Yes.
Okay. So here were some tools that we used. I will just reiterate them. So in the third session, Asim pointed to this difference between causation and or association. And this is a good example to just pictorially show us what we are doing, although we call it causation. Is it really causation? So this is famous Paulo's experiment. And when they first show the food to the dog, the dog starts salivating. But then also they ring the bell, nothing happens with the dog. But what they do is they keep ringing the bell and showing the food, ringing the bell, showing the food, so that whenever there is food, there was bell. Whenever there were no bell, no food. So this sort of an association is now, if you like, hardwired in the mind of this dog. And then they said, okay, let's ring the bell. Then the dog started salivating because now let's put ourselves in the shoes of the dog, as if bell makes the food or bell has some share in the making of the food. So this sort of an association is there. So what this experiment is showing us is what we generally say as causation is not necessarily implying causation. And this is a very good example for that. So taking it from there, this is how we do experiments in the lab, and this became our, if you like, intuitive way of thinking. So we put seed, soil, water. We have the plant and flower. And we say, okay, let's get rid of water. Seed, plant, nothing. No flower, no plant. And this way, we thought that, okay, we proved that water has a share in the making of the plant. This was our understanding prior to showing you the case of Paulo's dogs. So, good. I mean, everything seems okay up to this point. And we defeated this idea. But something fancy comes out, like neuroscience pops up. I mean, the previous example was the age-old example. Now is, let's say, the neuroscience is kicking in, and they say that, okay, there is certain sort of people which are super aggressive, like those criminals, and they found out that if we remove this part of their brain, they become tame. So therefore they conclude that this part of the brain has something to do with the aggressiveness of the human. So this way of thinking, I'm just showing this as a practical example of the use of this scheme over here. So if we are getting some trouble with, if I poke this side of the brain, the guy starts hearing music, so maybe this part of the brain is really playing the music, whatever. So these examples are showing that the association and causation are different things. So, but we suggested an alternative approach. And just to make it more visual, I'm picking up this story from Quran, and we talked about this methodology before, but I'm just going to show it within a story. So this man, this is from Quran chapter 21st, verses 51 to 69, but I'll just show the pictures. So the boy, Ibrahim, his name is Ibrahim, a boy at the time, he comes and sees that his people are believing in idols. And he says, okay, I have an idea. I'm going to show them a lesson to those people that live in those idols, because they are thinking that the idols are their providers, protectors, this and that. So he takes an axe. He goes and then shatters all the idols but the largest one. And he doesn't stop there. He puts the axe to the neck of the large idol. And then he escapes. So a crime is done, but nobody is in the crime scene. So what will the people do? So people come and they say, okay, there was this guy which was messing up with our gods. He was not, he was speaking ugly about them. Maybe he did something. Let's ask him. So they invite him. He comes and he says, he just points to, look at him. I mean, he has the axe. Definitely, they are broken with the axe, and he has the axe. So maybe he did it. So what happens right now is he's just calling them to their senses. I mean, the boy in this story, Ibrahim is calling them to their senses. What they do. So in one side of the scale, you have this effect, which is broken idols. On the other side, Ibrahim is suggesting them to put the idol plus the X. But it doesn't stop there. So what does it mean to have those idols in one side? So, sorry, I put it in the wrong way. No, it's right, okay. So, breaking of idols, what does it really mean? When you look at those breaking of idols, it requires knowledge because you need to know how to use this X. I mean, if you give it to a dog, for example, can a dog use an X? Certainly not. So a sort of knowledge is required in this simple action of breaking. I mean, and it's not building up something, it's just breaking a simple action. Knowledge is required. A power is required. This guy needs to move from one idol to the other. And will, I mean, you need to get into action, so you are willing to break something. Then somebody must be angry with the idols. Some hatred, some other feeling needs to be there. Ability to move, certainly, because you need to go all around. But on the other side of the scale, what do you have? This idol over there, which doesn't have any of those qualities. We can imagine maybe he has some sort of a hatred, but definitely he doesn't have will, knowledge, power, or cannot move. Wherever you put the idol, it stays there. So it doesn't scale. So the guys are thinking about that, I mean, internally. Ibrahim didn't teach them this, but just calling them to senses because this is simple human logic. I mean, nothing fancy. So they say, no, it doesn't match. This cannot be the case. This cannot be the door. But they say if we put Ibrahim to the other side of the scale, I mean, he is, just a wrong picture, but he fits perfectly. I mean, if he is the doer of the action, then they say, okay, this must be the guy. Instead of questioning their own wrongdoing, what they do, they set a fire, throw Ibrahim into the fire. But the rest of the story, you can read it from Quran. So, this is a very simple logic. So we are not confusing association versus causation. But we are coming with this alternative, very simple logic, which is, if there is an action, first there must be a door. If the door is not visible, I mean, we don't see the door in the environment, then what we can do, we can deduce qualities of the door based on the qualities that the action demands. Like the breaking of idols, what sort of qualities does it require? So we just list them down. Then we consider all possible candidates, possible suspects. If this guy can be, if this guy can be, if this guy can be. And for example, we easily eliminated the large idol because it doesn't match the criteria. So let's come back to our baby. So what do we observe in here? We will do some basic observations. The baby, first of all, is existing right in front of our eyes. So we are not talking about in any of those discussions. We didn't give any historical account. We didn't go to how the first protein was synthesized or anything like that. The baby is existing right in front of my eyes. And I am trying to explain what made this. I mean, how did this happen to be? And it was not there before. I mean, this is an important part. The baby was not there before, and now the baby is there. So it is made. So who or what made it? And I do observe an artistic design. A beautiful baby. Wise arrangements. I mean, 2 eyes, nostrils, nose, mouth. I mean, out of beauty, there is this very wise arrangement of external body. On top of that, the program of this baby, it's like a 0-kilometer human. I mean, it's going to become a human being, and with all those capabilities of human is right there. But wisely arranged. But also, this baby is being constantly renewed. Like the hairs, you see, they are going to grow, or, I mean, the baby is going to grow. So it's not a static object. So it's not like once, if I can explain how it is made, it keeps changing, it keeps growing for good, actually. So it's not like a decay, but it is improving, if you like. So after observing those facts about the baby, then what do we observe further? So wise arrangement is showing that there is a wisdom being manifest over there. Whatever, to whomever, to whatever this wisdom belongs, this is what we have been questioning. But the part to underline is, I do observe wisdom. And I do observe knowledge. Whoever put those eyes over there, and in the previous session, we were talking about the footprints of the house, very precise measurements. Same precise measurements are in this baby's shape, body shape, or spiritual shape. Somebody must have will, whoever made this baby, and I do observe manifestation of power. But there's one problem in this picture. The baby is the only thing in this picture, but nothing happens as such in the existence. Nothing is in the vacuum. So generally what our experiments happen to be in science is, we just take something under the microscope in the vacuum and try to explain what's going on in here, disregarding what's happening around. But this baby is not in the vacuum. So starting from those bacteria up until the sun, I mean, the baby is in interaction with all of them, and all the others are interacting with each other as well. So this wisdom, knowledge, will, and power to make this baby should be comprehensive. It's not like if you have enough of a knowledge to how this baby functions, you're good. No, the baby has a relation with the sun, so you need to know how the sun acts, and you should, or whatever controls or makes the baby, should be having control over the sun, and also the moon and the frog and everything, whatever this baby is in interaction with. And in previous sessions we saw that neither the external causes nor internal, the baby itself, nor the nature is capable of doing such a thing for several different reasons for each session. Therefore, who is the maker then? So, again we use this scale. Nothing in the universe has the qualities that the observed effect, which is the baby in this case, demands. So thus they cannot be its maker. None of them can be the maker of the baby. Nor they can interfere with its making, because we do observe an order in there. So what happens then? We consumed all possible options out there, yet we need some maker. So the options that we considered were all within the existence, within the universe. And we couldn't find a maker for this within the universe. So what? Does that mean that there is no maker? But this is contradictory to my initial understanding. As long as there is an action, there must be a doer. I mean, there is no other way around. It's not possible. So there must be a maker, but the maker is not like any of these. Because any of these, if they were able to be the maker, I would say this is the maker. But I already said that the maker is not like them. Neither the maker can be like them, can resemble them in any sense. What that means is, I always think in terms of smell, color, shape, size. This is how I conceptualize things, right? But the things that I can smell, that I can measure, was not able to neither be the doer nor have any share in the making of the baby. What that means is, the maker is, when I talk about the maker now, which is out, should be, must be outside of the existence that I observe, he shouldn't have any size, or at least I cannot talk about him having a size, having a smell, having a color, or anything that I use to describe things. He is unlike anything. This is what we mean by the maker must be absolute, because we use this a lot. Yeah.
How do you reach to that conclusion to say, to have certainty in saying that, for example, if the baby is beautiful, that the maker cannot be beautiful?
Mm-hmm. Because the idea of beauty that I have is about the things around me. So when I say beautiful, a beautiful baby, a beautiful woman, something beautiful, a beautiful flower pops up in my head. And I was trying to explain the phenomena that I observe with this mind, and I found out that none of them can be the maker. So this is my building blocks for the maker that I'm trying to find. If I was able to, then I would say, okay, this is the maker. Now that I cannot find, and now I am talking about someone not of type of any of these, then I cannot use my preconceived ideas about the structure or definition for the maker. What I could say is, I do observe beauty over here. The beauty is his or its making or action, or using a more terminology, manifestation. Yet I don't know what he or she or it looks like. I have no idea about that. And I shouldn't have. And this is what absolute in this sense means. Not of type of the things around me. So I cannot describe him in terms of what I observe, what I interact with. So when we say all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful, what do we mean by that? So all-powerful in this case means I do observe manifestation of power, and the only thing I'm saying is the source or the maker of this power is not from here. But I don't mean by that I can lift this much, I can lift 50 kilos, but I cannot lift 100 kilos. But God can lift 100 plus 100 plus 100. It's not like his power is larger in magnitude. This is not what all-powerful means. All-powerful means all the manifestations of power that I observe is from him, but in terms of starting to imagine him, I cannot imagine, because if I start imagining a God, this would be a worldly God. I am starting to put boundaries. If I was able to do that if such a thing would be the door, I would observe him around me anyways. So this is why all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful means unimaginable.
So are we saying that we're trying to understand perhaps the qualities of the maker by negating what the maker cannot be?
Kind of, but not only that. We are trying to understand the maker through manifestations. I know him saying that he must be the maker of this baby. Still, I am having a relation with him through the baby, but I'm not raising my head, if you like, because we are now in the horizontal relation, I and baby. I'm looking at baby and I'm saying that the maker of this baby must be him. This is all I can say about him. But I'm not trying to raise my head to the skies, metaphorically, and imagining a Zeus-like God which has those muscles and everything, but like a superhuman. No, this is not qualities that are being used to convey the message about the maker. It's not depicting a persona. So this is what those absolute, or the way that I understand the concept of absolute, or all those all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful. And just to step back for, which session was it? I guess it was nature. So in the example of those water droplets, and we were saying that every single particle needs to be an all-knowing. It was with the abuse of notation, not this meaning, a particle that knows everything in the universe. This is what it meant. So in this case, it was meaning a magnitude of knowledge, which is huge. Every particle needs to know every other particle and the combinations and everything. But in the case of now, we just negated all of them. We come to a point saying that God is all-knowledgeable. All-knowledgeable doesn't mean that God's knowledge is, I keep writing a lot of pages of a book and my knowledge is only 3 books. God's knowledge is large numbers of books. So, this is going a little bit technical now, but this is different than infinity, or the sort of infinity that we generally use in terms of counting numbers. Because when we say we start counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, we go to infinity, a very large number, but or not really a number, but a concept. But still, it has small parts. I cannot measure plus infinity, but I can know part of it, I say. Still, it starts from 0 up to somewhere that I cannot reach. But at least I can capture part of it. But this one means, no, I cannot capture part of it because I am not defining it. I'm just trying to make sense of him based on manifestations. Why is this distinction important? I am always staying in the side of existence. I'm not trying to pass the boundary, which I cannot pass the boundary of existence. First, he was asking.
Go ahead.
So it makes a lot of sense, right? All-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful, because if you don't understand the relation between the sun and the baby and how the baby interacts with the insects, like you cannot build a system that works well with each other. But how did you come to the conclusion that there's a maker?
Okay, once.
Yes.
So
I don't know if I'm jumping.
No, this is a good question. So one in here, we can take it two ways. First of all, order. Let's give the intuitive explanation first. Order means if there are two, like number 2, 1 and 1, then we are not going to observe any harmony. And this was being considered for the case of it happens by itself. We were saying that if the particles were acting on their own, like in this arch example, so they will need to agree upon where this stone is going to stay, where the other stone is going to stay. So there wouldn't be any order that we will observe anyways. This is intuitive example. It makes sense in terms of, in this case also, there's not going to be any common truth. This is another thing. If you say that, for instance, maybe they are two, but they get on well with each other. But this can only happen if there's a common truth out there, which we need to agree upon. But now we are talking about some things outside of existence, which they themselves define those truths, so there's no common truth anyways. But pushing this aside, now we are coming to absoluteness, absolute oneness, meaning that it's not countable one. It means only. Outside of existence. Once you say outside of existence and try to count things outside of existence, this is what this out there for. You cannot measure. I mean, you cannot say its color is like this, because counting is something that we use here. And the things that we were able to count, we said that they're not able to do it anyways. So we need to discard the idea of counting when it comes to talk about absolute. So it is one and only. So it's not a countable one. It means only and unique.
Yeah, that picture over there, the scale that doesn't balance, reminded me of a verse in the Quran that says, "And give full measure when you measure, and weigh with an even balance." None of us is a shopkeeper here, right? We don't work with balances, but we all balance or see if causes and effects balance on our minds day to day, right? So this is an example of how Quran talks to all of us, and especially in this context. And about the example of Abraham, he essentially forced them to weigh with an even balance if they were to convict him. If you want to convict me, at least in this instance, you need to weigh with a balance, with an even balance.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very good point. That's right.
I'm not sure I got the even balance part. What do you mean? Weigh with the even balance?
It says weigh with an even balance. So balance, the two sides of the scale should balance out, right?
Yeah.
If they don't balance out, then say they just reject that the cause, the seeming cause makes the effect. If they don't balance.
I think it kind of
That's
means
what
like
Yusuf was talking.
decluttering it, like removing it. In my opinion, I think even balance kind of refers to the idea of not skewing or not kind of messing up with the balance itself, irrespective of whether or not it has any objects on it. So you know how, like, don't tamper with the balance, meaning don't clutter your reality with any prejudices. So as long as you observe things as they are without any prejudice, and then they seem shifty, by all means pass away observations. But I guess in a way that's the beauty, that everything is so well balanced if you remove your prejudice from it.
Any comments, questions? So, what does that practically mean? Okay, now there is one all-knowing, all-powerful, absolute creator. What does that mean? I mean, speak in a plain language. So it is like everything at every moment is directly being made or created by him. Because so far we were saying maybe it's nature causes itself, but now that we come to a point that none of these are doing, then the baby smiles, or the baby hair of the baby is growing, or the baby is being fed and digesting something. What our now conclusion implies that each of these actions right now, happening right now, because we were not going for a historical account again, it's not like once you can set the system up, it can keep work by itself. We said that no, it itself doesn't work. That means the baby right now, if the hair is growing, the absolute creator is right now directly growing the hair of the baby. This is what in plain language, this is what it means. So, further, like if you go to side of the river and you observe this beautiful scene out there, like water is flowing through the stones, you see all those beautiful reflections. I get excited when I go to side of the river and see this, because I am feeling like each of those lines over there, curves over there, is being right now painted in front of my eyes. I see the tip of the brush. I don't see who is holding. I don't see the hand that has the brush. But what I do observe is, it is being painted right in front of my eyes. So it's so much of a close relation with my creator right there, because he is acting right in front of my eyes. I don't see the hand again, which is holding the brush. But I do observe that he keeps painting.
My question. How do you confirm the directly part? I can experience everything around me at this moment is existing, but how do you confirm the directly?
So what does indirectly would mean? Let's assume particles are given some qualities. I'm going to talk about this later and again, but right in here, let's put it. Particles are given some intellect, and now the particles are acting. What would that mean? It happens by itself. From now on,
I'm not attributing the source of its, intellect to the particle, though. I guess if you imagine a pendulum, and if I create a pendulum which swings from one corner to another, and I give it its initial swing, and it moves from, let's say, one right to the left, and then it moves from left to the right as it is created. Indirectly, I am moving the pendulum. I'm not directly in touch with the pendulum, moving it. That's just how I've created the pendulum. To be able to represent that the pendulum itself does not have the ability to move or directly stop, but it also points towards that, look, something initiated me, or something is acting upon me. And even in the non-stopping of the pendulum is also saying, look, there is this force that's choosing to not stop me either.
So, first I'm going to again give a intuitive example. This doesn't prove anything, but just to give an intuition. So, think about a cartoon. So, somebody with the abuse of notation created Bugs Bunny and draws the Bugs Bunny for the first frame. Gave some initial quality, some personality to Bugs Bunny. But does the Bugs Bunny play itself? Or every single frame of this cartoon is being drawn? Because as long as there is a change, then that means there is a choice being made. So who is it that makes the choice? If Bugs Bunny is moving the hand, so is it like the qualities are given to Bugs Bunny and now the Bugs Bunny is moving the hand? Or the painter is, like he created the idea of Bugs Bunny and also gave it a shape, also keeps giving the same thing in every single frame of a cartoon. This is just to make it intuitive. It doesn't prove anything.
So the emphasis on directly comes from the idea of, or the reality of continuous renewal. If we don't take continuous renewal into the consideration, then saying directly or indirectly does not make sense. Because we are talking about every stage, every moment, every single particular, whatever you focus.
I think there are two statements being made here. The one that I'm making is creation is made to be, creation is made to be dynamic in its nature, so I can observe the dynamicness in its existence. And what I'm understanding, if I'm understanding correctly, the statement that you're making is that creation is being made dynamically. So where is the, confirmation? And the Bugs Bunny example I don't think is a bad one. I think it's good. It's like, yes, if it's static creation, then it's clearly not existing in another moment, right? The next screen does not exist. It has to be created. I agree that part, but directly implies, for me at least, that the creator must step in again, or the artist must step in and create the second screen, as opposed to the artist who does not have the ability to even create something which allows to, let's say, replicate or create the next scene. And the reason why that's a very hard concept for me to grasp is, as I understand my consciousness and free will in my reality...
Don't get there.
Okay, I'll stop.
Because if you come to free will, it needs to be handled separately. This is why I would like to keep it separate. But in our presentation so far, you are right, mostly talking about at a single frame of time, how baby is related to the sun, how baby is related to the frog and everything. But also, baby right now is related to baby from 30 days from now. Because it's not like now it's a baby, 10 minutes later it becomes a huge frog, then 10 minutes later it becomes a fish. No, baby is within the lifetime of a baby, the frames are also consistent.
Let's listen for us.
I just wanted to make a brief remark to think about when we say creation. Do we actually witness creation, or do we in fact witness lordship and sustainership, not creation? So that it's only a figure of speech to say at the moment. In our lived reality, there is no at the moment. There is not already the next moment. So, creator, as far as I'm concerned, directly is either it is directly or it is by itself. I have to say that what qualities existed at moment t were existed at t plus 1 because t had those things that became t plus 1. It was able to sustain itself. But so when I deny that it cannot be by itself, what I'm denying simultaneously with creation, what I really mean is it cannot sustain itself. I think the concept of sustaining, what I'm witnessing is sustainership rather than simply creatorship. Creatorship within sustainership is what I really witness.
I guess that Faraz already highlighted what I would say, but when we say sustenance, I guess it becomes relatively easy compared to, I would say, what? Relatively easy to accept. Like we can say that yes, pendulum cannot sustain itself, but when it comes to movement, like a simple movement, we think that it can move itself. Like then, for instance, my question to Qasim would be: then you drop the pendulum. I'm not asking why. Don't confuse. How the pendulum moves? Why do you think? No, it's why, but you. Like, why do you think the pendulum can move itself when I drop it?
I'm not at all attributing the ability to move itself. I'm saying that to sustain it, to sustain the movement, why must the creator be directly, in the sense...
So if you do not attribute the movement to pendulum, whom are you going to attribute?
The source, the initial source.
Then it's moving the pendulum, right?
Initially, right?
No, not initially. So even the next step, who's moving the... So you drop the pendulum,
let me finish my statement that I was starting. We said that, okay, for a time moment, the baby and the sun and everything is related. And because of this reason, we said that it cannot happen itself because of those intricate relations. Now take it in the time domain. The same relation happens in the time domain as well. So can, given such a quality to this baby or the particle of the baby, how to happen in the next moment, next 300 years or whatever. Now we are talking about particle. The particle needs not only to know this moment, but also needs to know, the all-comprehensive, all-knowledgeableness with respect to the particle now also spans the entire time, not only a single moment of time. So this is how we concluded that it cannot happen by itself. Particle cannot make by itself because then the particle needs to know everything at this time point. Now expand it to the time. Same thing happens with the time. Now it is getting much, much more complicated. Then we are starting to assume that God is giving every particle such an all-compassing knowledge for whatever reason we would like to think as such, instead of doing him himself, just saying that, okay, particle, you move from here to there. We are imagining, sort of saying that God gives this particle all the knowledge of all particles right now, plus all knowledge of particles in the however many millions before, years before and after. So now things are getting much more complicated. This is why the idea that you say is really boiling down to it happens by itself. When we say God gave it the quality and now it goes on, is almost equal to saying that it happens by itself. And also the point that Faraz made is very beautiful and important, although it's going a little bit, by itself it's worthy of discussing as a 8 sessions retreat, but I would just point to a text, if you would like to read about that, the 30th flash. We are now studying the 23rd flash. 30th flash of Nursi, the 6th part of it, is talking about this specific meaning that he was considering. So it is now, everything is being sustained by the self-subsistent one, Al-Qayyum. And this topic is really, if you like, mind-blowing and changes all your worldview. I think so, maybe at a later retreat.
I think the simple answer is that the creator or the sustainer or the maker is directly making the things at any given moment, because any given moment, the motion of the pendulum requires an absolute knowledge, power, wisdom, and so on. It is not like, okay, like there is a maker defines the pendulum at the beginning with absolute knowledge. That is actually true for each single moment of the motion of the pendulum. That's why creator needs to get directly involved with the process.
Otherwise, I cannot explain what I observe. When you say creator has to act in like that, that means what I observe cannot be explained otherwise. It must be as such, otherwise I wouldn't observe what I am observing.
You wouldn't be able to explain the next moment of the pendulum.
Yeah.
So the word directly is a direct consequence of rejecting the other 3 options, right?
Also, an idea in our minds which says God created the things, like in the Big Bang, for example, it is the religious version of evolution, let's say. God created the Big Bang and from there on it goes by itself. It works by itself.
But that's part of the previous 3 options that you rejected.
It is.
So if you rejected those, direct consequences, it has to be directed.
Right. That's right.
Last comment, please.
So I think what he's saying is, what Nursi refers to as intermediaries. You can't, if you conclude that a moment must be brought into existence by an absolute source, you cannot then ascribe intermediaries to what you're saying, the motion of the pendulum. You're ascribing intermediary to the particle itself. You're saying, well, it's brought into motion at the beginning moment, but subsequently the particle is taking on causality into its own hands, when it was not possible to do so even from the very beginning of its motion. So how can it do it for every subsequent movement of the pendulum? So that's what, the verse, God, the eternally besought one, means. Everything is in need at every moment, eternally besought. You can't, absolute, that's the very nature of absolute.
Thank you. I think it is still a live question for Qasim because he's alone right now and he has lots of protests right now. You take your time, Go ahead, please.
There is a next session which talks about
Good news. Thank you.
The journey, continuous journey.
We have lots of sessions here. We are talking about everything. Okay, go ahead.
So, and again, another one was a book is being written right in front of our eyes, like this baby is, if you like, a book. We don't see who is holding the pen, we just see the tip of a pen, and in this example of a baby, every single particle you can take as tip of a pen, because a particle moves from here to there, you feed the baby, it just goes to somewhere. You see the tip of the pen, and the book is being written right in front of your eyes. So it also gives this much of a close relation with the author. It's not like somebody has written the book 10 years ago or 50 years ago, he is now dead, and now I am trying to interact with him through reading his writings, which is outdated maybe. But this is not the case. The creator is writing or acting right in front of my eyes. And this is why sometimes the universe is being either referred to as the book of the creator, or sometimes even going further, speech of the creator. So he is speaking with this river, if you like. And every single one of those lines are becoming his words of speech.
So just to briefly, again, this will come in the last session, but practically speaking, we have problems, right? And I can break those problems down to, in a spatial metaphor, is the distance between me and beauty, the distance between me and wisdom. How far or close I am to love, to beauty, to perfection, to wisdom, to these qualities. The distance between me and this is what generates my suffering, my pain, my questions, my dissatisfactions. And that distance is related to my understanding of the creativeness of the world. And it boils down to that. How directly, it's a matter of, degrees. How directly do I find myself in the presence, encompassed by, infused with, a product of love, wisdom, beauty? How close I find myself with it and it to me is the source. That distance is the source of, or could potentially be the answer to all my very practical troubles. So this notion of creativeness is ultimately tied in terms of, if I think about it, how distant from my perspective I am from absolute love, absolute beauty, absolute perfection, absolute life, absolute eternity, and so on. That is in my perception.
It's contingent upon your understanding of absolute. What do you understand from absolute?
Yeah. How far or close I found myself.
Yeah.
And as you were, for example, going back to the session that you were describing, the doubts that you have. So, for example, things are going bad with your work, or like some bad things are happening between you and your parents. So let's say, what does that imply? Is it like, if I think that it's because of them, it's because of me, it's because of my boss? We said that causes do not have any effect. So, or it happens by itself, things are going random, or by chance all these are happening. We said that no, nothing is happening by chance. Or, well, this is the nature of the thing. Sometimes things are getting the ropes are being pulled tight, and this is how it happens. We said no, nature doesn't do that. So then what happens is everything is being directly written or done or painted by him. So then, yes, I need to see that nothing is out of control then. Then, I need to take it from there. So it is purposefully being painted, written, and it's not like I am forgotten. It's not like he created and God is silent or away or anything. No, he is on action. And this is what I observe, so he's not far. He's really closer to me than my jugular vein, really. But then, how am I going to make sense of that will come in the later sessions.
Can I make a comment on this book example? Just one thing. 1 point. This is an analogy.
Okay.
This is an analogy. Writing the book as if sentence by sentence, line by line, but in reality we don't see a book which is written line by line. If you take the universe as a book, we see that every moment that we can imagine, the whole written book is manifested. This analogy must be taken to the whole book written by the pen at the same time.
And every moment is becoming a different book because the book is changing.
Not because edit another line.
Yeah.
That's what your pendulum exam edits another line is absolutely wrong. Yeah.
Right.
No, thank you.
So, I mean, this is what you were asking, actually. So, God created the system which now runs by itself. God gave the qualities to the system initially. Okay, I'm accepting a God, but why wouldn't it be possible that God created the system and now lets the system run by itself? And, we talked about this. Either it's going to be, it includes the idea of it happens by itself after some point, because we are now imagining godly qualities being given to earth, which is already shown to be absurd. But on top of that, we should ask a psychological question. Why would you consider such a case? I mean, why? Because the creator, every single frame is a new frame. I mean, it's being written anew, pictures are new, like the Bugs Bunny case. So it would be even harder to accept it the other way around, because now we need for each particle to have all-encompassing knowledge of space and time and everything. We are imagining them to be given at every single particle. Because generally the psychology of this question is being like, it's easier to accept if God created once and gave the qualities and now it runs by itself. But it's not really easier. Instead, it's tougher, a harder to accept idea. Because now that we are trying to conclude with the idea that an all-knowing creator is handling everything, since this is now becoming counterintuitive, if you like, in a sense, we are trying to find some outdoors out of that to some addendums. But this one is saying that it's not any easier, really, because every single frame is a different frame, like the Bugs Bunny. So instead of making a machinery to make every single frame, the change is constant. So the machine needs to change constantly as well. So what would be the point of creating a nature, a law, which needs to itself change constantly? So it's not really making things any easier to say that he created, gave the qualities, and now they act by itself. If you like accepting, because, again, we come up with this idea, since one creator doing everything seems to be very implausible or tougher to accept. But the other one is not easier, much harder to accept. It shouldn't make any sense.
I mean, to tie in what Faraz and Qasim said, I think the issue is when you make a conclusion about a moment, you can't apply that conclusion in all subsequent moments. You can't, the logic that's false is, you can't say, oh, because this moment must be brought into existence by an absolute one, I can now speak on this absolute one's behalf and say, oh, he created this moment, this moment, this moment. Because you can then say whatever you want. It's illogical to take the position of an absolute one. That's why you can't say, the creation itself. You can only speak about the act. So the Quran never says to confirm the creator. He confirms the one who created the heavens and the earth. So you always have to look at every moment at the heavens and the earth to make a conclusion. If you then say, okay, well then God created this, that's a baseless statement. And that's the problem with like a deistic or watchmaker world.
So you were talking about the practical implications, and Faz made a nice comment, which was the suffering is because of the distance between me and all the desirable qualities I'm after. And that reminded me of the original verse, is there any doubt about the Lord of the heavens and the earth? And the example I gave I think in Ms. Faraz's presentation about the son not being satisfied and complaining about the father, right? Because of that distance. And the father says, am Am I not your? Is there any doubt about my Father? So all you need to do is understand the createdness. If you reject all these three options, and understand the createdness, that everything is directly in the moment by moment, provided to me in the heavens and the earth for me. That's all it takes for me for the Son to understand that the Father is doing His fatherhood, and the Son is upon the Son to understand what's going on, and then that distance will be closed, and the Son will be successful.
So I realize that I forgot to mention one little point, and I think it's important, so I'm jumping back. So when we say absolute, did I forget it again? Okay, so the messenger says, do not think about God's self. So what does that mean? Do not think about God's self. Absolute means you cannot think or imagine God's self. Because when we think about something, we start putting colors or smell or measures. But how am I going to interact with the Creator? Think about the things that He creates or He acts. So the only tool that we have is the creation around us. So when messenger says don't think about God's self, this doesn't mean that don't think about God and blindly believe. No. I am going to observe the baby that is being created and growing or is being made beautiful. Then from there I'm going to conclude that then there must be a maker of or the absolute source for this beauty. But again, not thinking about the self of God means you cannot. Yeah, in essence, you cannot do that anyways. And you shouldn't try to do it because it's, not possible. So, just to mention. So, this was the question that came in the previous sessions. And how and why is it more reasonable to accept that one creator is doing all of these? Okay, you showed that it is tough to accept or understand that or accept that it happens by itself, it's illogical, nature causes illogical. But now, or even we said that it's a human construct idea for the cause, nature, saying that this some sort of a abstract knowledge, all-encompassing knowledge, but within the universe, it doesn't make sense, we said. So, how is it being any easier when it comes to, easier to accept? So this is what I mean by easier. How is it being any easier to say that one is making all of these? So, again, I'm going to give an intuitive example for that from Osman's session. So he showed us those water droplets and the sun being reflected over each water droplet. So he was asking us the question, when you see such a thing outside, you don't look at the sun, you don't look at the sky. So it was raining, let's say. After the rain, you come out and you saw that everywhere is filled with suns. Would you think it like that? Every single one of them is a sun. Small, tiny in size, yet sun. Has all 7 colors, all the qualities of the sun. Or, is it easier for you to accept that? Or would you say that, no, then you see the sun and say that, well, all of these are reflections of a single sun. So in this sense, accepting this idea makes much more sense, and it's not like counterintuitive, because as we concluded that this maker is absolute. Absolute meaning that we are not talking about a magnitude of power, magnitude of knowledge. We are just saying that everything we observe is his. So, it's not, because generally we would say it's not possible because it's beyond the capacity. But once you conclude about absoluteness, then there is no question about capacity. So this option becomes one and only viable option to accept. Then this was also a question from yesterday. Okay, but causes are still there. So what is their use? What are they good for? We can ask this question from 2 ways. One would be, then why did God create causes? But such a question would be unanswerable from my point of view, because I'm not an engineer of this universe. I don't know what decisions God made when he was making it. The only thing I can do is, what is it good for me? I mean, what is then the utility of causes that I can make use of them? So in this example, for instance, there's this apple and apple tree. It's the apple, the beautiful apple, like the gift, is connected to this dry branch. Okay, when I look at the tree, look at the apple, as Asim was showing yesterday, the guy was, the FedEx carrier was bringing a bag and a box, and there was a gift in the box, right? So, in this example, the FedEx carrier is being this, the branch, and the apple is being gift. But when I look at the apple, what do I see? And in the previous session, there was also a very good point saying that, I guess Faraz, you made it, the relation between me and the apple, if I start considering them, what do I see? Somebody must be really loving me to give me such a gift, as the example of Asim. Whoever sent me this gift of whatever he was liking most, an iPhone 10, so nobody would send like $1,000 gift to someone he hates. I mean, he or she must be certainly loving Asim to send him as a gift like $1,000 iPhone. Like whoever sends this apple to me must be loving me, knowing my taste and everything. So we do observe all these in between the apple and the branch, although they are attached like this. But the distance between them is vast. What do I mean by that? So when you look at horizon, you see the mountain, and right next to mountain from far, you observe that there is moon. From far, it looks like they're attached. But in fact, there's a vast distance between the mountain and the moon, and also the stars, even a larger distance between the moon and the stars. And in between this distance, we start seeing some, this is the metaphor. Now going back to the apple. So there's a huge distance, although they are attached. The apple and the branch, although they are attached, there's a huge distance between the two. And this distance between them was...
In terms of what?
In terms of, I do observe love in the apple, but I don't observe love in the branch or in the tree. I do observe knowledge in the apple, but so there's a huge gap. I mean, in the scale example, it doesn't scale. So this distance between them is there I start learning about my maker. So this causal relation, or apparent causal relation, is the way I learn about my maker. Because of this distance, I do observe that there's manifestation of love in the apple, but I know that it's not the branch. So the apparent cause I deny. So this causal relation is very much related to the way that we learn. Human is learning by negating. We are not accepting seeing something. We negate. This is why we formulated in La ilaha illallah. This is very much aligned with how we learn. We negate all those false ideas. At the end, what is left with us is illa Allah, and which is, as a result of this apparent causal relation, we learn about him.
I'm not going to bring another Abrahamic story.
Yeah, I'm not planning to. But yeah, we could have, but no. So, a second aspect might be, this one is more psychological, the second one. And this looks to not like beautiful things like an apple and a branch maybe, but sometimes bad things happen. And I guess the worst thing that happens to us is death. Or, I don't know, your boss fires you or something like this happens. And we don't observe any wisdom behind this action. So, we get really annoyed with that. And, but I'm going to give you an example from either parent-child relation. So the parent is the guardian and the teacher for the child. So the relation needs to be kept intact because the child is in need of learning from the parent. But sometimes it happens like you have to teach the child some hard lessons, but you shouldn't really damage the relation. What would you do? And an example from a friend was saying that his brother at some point decided to drop off from high school. He didn't even mention this to his father. He just dropped off. 2 weeks later, the father realizes that the school calls the father, says that your son is not coming. He says, okay, son, what's wrong? He says, oh, father, I decided not to go to the school. He says, okay, what are you going to do? He says, okay, his father was fixing the lorries, trucks. He says, I'm going to work in your place. He says, no, don't work in my place. This is my, I have decisions. I never work. My son can never work in my company. But you go and work with your uncle's company. He is also fixing trucks, so work with him. The boy goes there to work, but he calls his uncle and says that when he comes, tell the people working in there to be super harsh with him. Give him a very good lesson. Life is even harder than you think it is. So in 2 weeks, they throw him the wrenches and everything, saying that bring it here and using vulgar language and everything. Then the guy, without even saying, starts going to school, and now he's a doctor. So these sort of things happen. So what does the father do in here? The guy needs to get a lesson. Learn something, because if he just goes and says that you have to do it, or directly beats him, he will not immediately see the wisdom behind this action. So it needs, this is how we learn. It takes time sometimes, and it is against our feelings. And gradually we are learning. So the Creator is, the way that I see, some causal things are being like this buffer between me and him, because my anguish initially goes to this cause. But then once now I'm calming down and starting to understand, then I see the wisdom behind it, and I say that no, it was not the cause actually. It was him, and it was a very wise decision to, the best example would be death. For example, think of death of a family member. And what would we immediately ask? How did he die? Was it a traffic accident? Was it cancer? And we will be angry with the cancer, or it was the doctor didn't treat him or her well, so we will be angry with them. But later on, as we realize the wisdom behind that, we say, no, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. He gave the life, he take it, we are turning back to him, everything is okay. So in this initial reaction, so the causes are also, from my perspective, acting as a buffer for this initial anguish. And there might be more things, but this is what I was able to come up with.
And we need the buffers to be able to continue the education.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, we are going to break up. And once this relation breaks up, it is hard to fix it. I guess it's being harder for human ego to step back and say that, yeah, I was wrong. So it's out of mercy. Again, these causes are there as a buffer. So now, since I still have 15 minutes, I keep going on. So then we come to a point saying that, okay, what is wrong if I say, okay, there's a God, but maybe some causes take role in the creation of insignificant things like, okay, God creates the large things, sun and moon and earth, yeah, he is controlling them, but what would be wrong to say that seeds are, just happens by itself, or, is he really messing up with these tiny details? Why shall he be? Because we are having this highness of the Creator as if it is contradictory to say that he should be not messing up with these stuff. And this is also tied to, I'm going to combine it with this next one. Does God need my worship? The two are going to be quite related. We also, automatically once the point comes to saying that everything is being done by him, then we say, okay, now that means he is the one that serves me for the breakfast today. He is the one that is now, he's providing me a lot. Now I need to return back to him. So this aspect, although it's going to be studied at the last session by Sister Isra in more detail, I'll just point to it very briefly. If I think the first one, something is being done not by the Creator, and also I want to be out of his control, like why shall I be worshipping him? Because in this case, something is not really being under his control. Next step, it comes to me, I don't want to be, under his control. I would like to push him away a little bit. So if I don't do these, then I am missing the whole point of creation. The point of creation was to teach me something. To teach me that I am being loved. And there is an all-knowing one which is manifesting on me and around me. And everything is worshipping him in the way that what worship means. As much as I am incapable, this bacteria over there is incapable, this plant over there is incapable. Yet, I do observe their incapability. Yet they are being provided, they are being given life and everything. So this is the worship over there. But if I do not do my worship, if I say that, no, I am by myself, as Birkan was saying, that I am the king of my life, I would not be able to observe the worshipping of this bacteria over there. I would think that bacteria can act by itself, the plant can act by itself. So, abandoning worship in this case, or asking this question, means that I am going to miss the whole point of the creation. Why I am here in this education, because I am on this planet and this life to learn. And if I say that, what's wrong if I say something is being done by itself, then that means, why am I here then? Because I am now abandoning the very crucial point of the education, which I shouldn't. And same thing with the worship. If I don't worship, meaning that if I don't recognize my neediness, my incapability, because worship is now understanding my neediness and that I am being provided constantly. Now I want to respond back to him. I am in need of worshiping. This worship makes me realize my purpose in here. If I don't say this for myself, I say, okay, I'm abandoning the worship, I'm abandoning the prayer and everything, then I wouldn't see it for the others as well, because I'm going to think, well, I don't need him, neither the plant needs him, nor the bacteria, nor the baby needs. So there is this very strong relation between the worship and the createdness. Thank you. So this is the last slide. I'm not sure if I should talk about that. Brother Adam, are you going to talk about this one in next session?
What is it being conversion? I'm not sure I'm following.
Okay, so this one is like at the very end of 23rd Flash. Nursi is closing with this very strong question, I would say. So he says that the scientists are claiming that there's no creation really. It's only conversion, like energy from one type converts into another type, or hydrogen and oxygen comes together, forms water. So there's this cycle is always there, or the water cycle.
Yeah. So they mean no creation out of nothing.
Yeah, nothing happens out of nothing. So we don't observe creation, they say.
Well, I think this was negated with the whole notion of what's wrong with saying things can hold their own qualities or hold their own power, etc. Right? So that was negated, and if anyone comes with this mindset, I think what you said already in this presentation has shown strong argument against that. So my presentation will be more on the journey of man now after arriving at this conclusion. Is it a one-time thing, or is it a continuous effort within life that needs to be continuously progressed in?
Yeah, and this is also another way of saying by itself or nature.
But I would just like to drop one sentence to here, because this is the way that Nursi is presenting it. I was hearing and reading the way that he was presenting it, and for years, although I was supposedly a believer and I was thinking that I understood what he was saying, while we were studying this part, I was saying that, well, is there any example of creation right in front of my eyes? It's funny but true. And we were saying that, well, maybe deep down the sea where there's no light, fish are still being provided, so God must be creating food out of nothing right there. Meaning that still my brain was working as if once the particles are created, then it carries on by itself. So what do I mean by creation? And when I say creation, I used to think that material, matter. But when we come to here, it's not only the matter that is being created, Because the example that I would give for this one is, in a book, yes, it is still paper and ink. But once you start writing a poem, a new creation is being out there. So the creation is not only for matter. There is this other forms which we kept saying from the very beginning. Knowledge is being observed, beauty is being observed, art is being observed. All these are new creations. At every single point is being created out of nothing. So it's not like, well, if I can explain or prove Big Bang, then the rest is going to be explained with chance or this and that. No, it doesn't explain the beauty. It doesn't explain the art, because these are new creations at every single point of time, and it happens right in front of my eyes. So the scientific explanation, quote unquote scientific explanation of, well, matter is eternal, or matter was once created somehow, and now it carries on and nothing is being created. It's just a conversion. It doesn't mean anything. I just wanted to drop this sentence and close with that.
Just one point on what you said last. I think even when it comes to just the things that you call as material, the physical beings, even there, I guess we shouldn't take them as staying there. Like, it's not just the immaterial things that's being created. Even the material itself, it's being created. The laws that we call as conservation laws, they are not explanations, they're just accounting. It says, if you count 3 atoms now, I will count 3 atoms then. It doesn't explain that, how these 3 atoms will be there. Yeah. It's just accounting, nothing more. Nothing more. Like, I'm not simplifying it, nothing more. Just accounting. That means if you count 3, you will count 3 there. So even the material itself is being created constantly.
And actually for this one, in my childhood, there was a chocolate shop. And I remember being quite interested and surprised by that. In this chocolate shop, there was a faucet. And they were opening the faucet and hot chocolate was coming after it. And since I get used to water coming out of faucet, chocolate coming out of it. So since my childhood, let's say, since it was the first time I am seeing it, I was shocked. If this was the case in the faucet in our house, and if I was observing water comes from the pipe, chocolate comes out of the faucet, 5 liters come water, 5 liters of chocolate goes out. Most likely, if I asked this question to my father, which would have seen this for 25, 30 years by then, he would say, well, it is the conservation or the conversion. Faucet converts water into chocolate. Now that, since this is not the case, we take it to be quite stupid to accept such a thing. But what we say, for example, in right there, this fan is turning, we say that electricity energy is being converted into movement. Or we say that in the light, electricity is converted into light. So this trick of conversion, it's just a word. It hides a lot of things behind it. But we should be careful about that. So the creation is always there.
So I'm just a little confused. So is the difference just the word conversion versus creation, but the process is the same? Because I've never experienced can matter be created in front of us, as in mass-wise, right? The weight doesn't change. It's the same weight. Which means
1 liter of water, 1 liter of chocolate. There is no chocolateness in water. There is no waterness in chocolate.
I guess he's saying that 1 liter of water and then 1 liter of water.
Conversion, I understand here, is a word or a term used by those people who believe God and try to use it as a mask. Instead of being able to explain what's happening in the world, createdness would be created. They use this tricky word called conversion, which tries to identify the process happening, saying that A gets converted into B, and A is created, and B is created, and C is created. Because I think what you're trying to say with this point of conversion. Is that helpful at all, what you're saying?
So the changing the vocabulary actually is a matter of what you believe happens in the background?
Because conversion means, as we were saying, it's once created, now it is changing or acting in itself. But what was our conclusion? We said directly every single one of them is being written. It means that water is painted, drawn, created. Or, let's give the example of hydrogen, oxygen, and water. So hydrogen is being created, oxygen is being created, and water is being created separately. So it's not like hydrogen and oxygen coming together and converting into water or making the water. This is again a causal relation which was already, or it happens by itself, already said that this is not the case, this cannot be the case.
If I can add to that hydrogen thing, I remember from chemistry classes in middle school, because it was shocking to me, the way they talked about it was, they used to go into a reaction and the water comes out, hydrogen and oxygen goes in and water comes out. And the professor said the law is that in a chemical reaction, always the elements that go into the reaction completely lose their qualities and gain completely new qualities at the end of the reaction. But when you ask her, she wouldn't say water is a new thing. She said, I explained water with hydrogen and oxygen. See, these two things add up, become water. You don't have to bring in a creator, like if you pressed her. But she also adds the rule that you actually completely change their qualities. Now, the mass might be similar, the same equal, but it's a completely new thing. But it's a way of masking. So if you call it as a new thing is being created, then people will start saying, well, how do you explain that? But if you say, no, we just measured, it's the same weight, things just convert. They get together, they become, they add on to each other as if there is nothing new visible. And then they come around and say, and that's another law, and nothing in the universe comes out of nothingness, and nothing goes into nothingness. It's just recycling. Yes. That somehow makes it slightly easier to hush away or put away the notion of a creator.
Yeah, so under those type of words, a lot of ideas are being hidden, implied. This is why the first session, or if you look to 23rd Flash that we are studying, the author says that there are some words which imply unbelief and are being widely used even also by the believers or Muslims. But he says, if we dig deep down what they means, this is what they means. So far in the 3 sessions before and now here, they are implying that some illogical things are taking place, or I must be accepting or believing in something which is illogical or contradictory. Yeah.
For us, okay.
This, I think I'm not sure if what you are trying to say, because I think I observe conversion in the sense like the leaves fall and they become something useful in the soil, and actually in that sense there's nothing that doesn't converse, or whatever the verb. But when it comes to questioning the source of this conversion, the action, I call it created action. So why they are being opposite in your understanding?
Let me give the example again, the intuitive example with Bugs Bunny. So let's say the concept of Bugs Bunny is created once. Good. Somebody said that Bugs Bunny should have this shape and these ideas and everything. But every single frame of a cartoon is also being drawn by hand. It's not like Bugs Bunny is moving or Bugs Bunny. So conversion implies once it's given some qualities and now it changes by itself. This is a common word, this is being used. This is why I would like to highlight it. Yes, we studied it, it happens by itself, is implying that. But generally this is missing from our perception that the two are the same. So conversion is implying that there's no interference from out there. Hydrogen and oxygen can become water by themselves.
Yeah, actually, the concept of conversion is not being criticized here. No creation in the universe, only conversion expression is being criticized here. So, I think that should make sense. Yes, first.
So yeah, I was just thinking to myself, if I were to say, someone would ask me, have you ever seen anything created in front of your eyes? What would I say? And what would I say if I was asked, have you ever seen anything but things being brought into existence from nothing? And I think in this retreat where I'm trying to go from saying, I've never seen creation taking place, to saying, I've seen nothing except creation taking place.
And actually, if you are claiming that there's a creation in every moment, then as a result, you cannot observe a creation. Why? Because you cannot observe the moment. I don't know. There are some numbers in the literature, but do you remember which defines the moment in terms of seconds? But it changes as far as I know from scholars to scholars. Actually, we cannot define what's the moment because we separate them, going down, but even still we cannot define the moment. So we define moment as also in our discussions as a theoretical thing. We cannot observe the moment.
Maybe the question should go back to the society, or the society for sure it's not what you think. So, based on those explanations, comments?
Actually, I didn't pay attention to the whole thing of the no creation in the universe. Basically, it's a denying of creation of the action. So I think now I got it. I got the point that my attention was on the, I felt like it as if there is no, I felt like it goes against my observation in the beginning. But now it's clear for me. Why did you ask?
Yeah, I just want to make sure you're comfortable with those responses.
Comments from here. Do you want to say something? Dr. Raja, do you want to say something?
The problem is, I was waiting for others to speak. So let them speak.
Okay.
And also, I think this is related to two concepts that Imam Said Nursi talks about, ibda and insha. Ibda refers to, in Arabic, this bringing out of nothingness, like creating out of nothing. And insha is more constructing, like somebody building a building. So you put the bricks, one brick on top of the other, and you construct it according to a plan. It's progressing one at a time. So many times we think this is how the world is happening. Hydrogen comes, oxygen comes, and they get together as if two bricks are put together, and then slowly it makes a wall. It becomes a wall. So somebody's constructing. He's using these ingredients to make a building or to make something. It looks like that, but within that, he says, even when you think things are being made by putting them together, adding them up, within it you can see ibda, things coming out of nothing. So like hydrogen, oxygen, these elements are brought together. It looks like you're adding two bricks to make this two-brick structure. Yes, they are connecting in a particular way and they become something. At the same time, in that process, what ends up as the product is nothing like hydrogen, nothing like oxygen. It's not a combination of adding up of those qualities. It's a completely new qualities now you have in water. So, and many times in the world, and we need both to be able to have a sense that somebody's constructing this. So we need those stages by stages. The baby develops in stages. At the same time, though, it's completely a new being. Child, 1-year-old and child 2-year-old is not just 1 + 1, like 2 1-year-olds. It's a new being. So that is something worthy of attention, to think about how we see things being constructed out of other things. Within it, we see actually they're being recreated from nothing.
And
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yusuf. Thank you so much, everybody. We have 25 more minutes to discuss in our free time, inshallah. We will pray at 3 p.m.
Dr. Ali was going to make a comment, waiting for everybody to finish, you said?
Very brief, the problem arises from the appearance question was very practical, very common. We don't really observe to be practical creation, really. We see just things are moving around, that's it. Yeah, that's correct. What we observe, I mean, practically speaking, it's correct. What has been discussed so far? Don't look at the film, but take one frame in the film in order to question the source of existence of that frame and then generalize it to other frames. So take one moment. It means take a picture of one moment. Take a picture of one moment and question how that moment exists. All the discussions was on this particular principle, how that moment exists. How do you explain the existence of that moment, attributing it to this, to that? If they prove to be impossible, then if it is possible, then that process continues. But if you think about, take one leaf and put in front of you how it exists in a new form, because yesterday its form was different.
So the non-belief, whatever the is, would say, you can't do it one way, in one sliver. You cannot separate and divide the things this way. Everything is based on a process. Everything is based on this chain through which it comes.
But not the same. Every moment is different from another. So that is what the illusion they want to make in explanation. Exploiting, misusing the human practical observation of the universe, as the Alpera was saying, I don't see creation. Yeah. Neither do I.
Thank you so much. As I said, we can continue to discuss in our free time. Thank you thanks for listening.